1. A world starting over. Picture a planet completely different from the one you know. No tropical forests, no green meadows, none of the landscapes we take for granted today. What you would see if you could look at Earth 245 million years ago was an almost unbroken desert, red and orange, stretching from pole to pole. The heat was suffocating. The air was far richer in carbon dioxide than anything we breathe today. And life? Life was starting from scratch. That's because just a few million years earlier, the planet had gone through the worst catastrophe in its history, the Great Dying of the Permian, an extinction event so devastating it wiped out more than 96% of all marine species and around 70% of all land species. The Earth was, for all practical purposes, empty. And it is in this destroyed world, on this stage of biological rubble, that the dinosaurs make their first entrance. 2. The first dinosaurs, chicken-sized, world-sized destiny. But don't be fooled. The first dinosaurs were not the colossi you're imagining. They were small, agile, unremarkable. The Eoraptor, one of the earliest we know of, measured just over a meter in length and weighed around 10 kilograms. To put that in perspective, it was smaller than a Labrador retriever. It ran on 2 legs, hunted insects and small lizards, and lived in the shadow of much larger and more dangerous creatures that dominated the period. The Herrerasaurus was somewhat bigger, reaching nearly 5 meters, but was still a mid-sized predator in a world where the real rulers were Rauisuchids and other archosaur reptiles that no longer exist. Dinosaurs at their beginning were not kings. They were the resourceful survivors who could make it work anywhere. And here is one of the most fascinating things about them. The success of the dinosaurs was not a lucky accident. It was built over tens of millions of years of constant adaptation. They had an upright posture, legs directly beneath the body like ours, rather than splayed to the sides like crocodiles. This meant they ran more efficiently, breathed better while moving, and spent less energy on locomotion. In a world still recovering from catastrophe, where resources were scarce, that efficiency was an enormous advantage. 3. Pangaea, when the world was one. But perhaps the most important feature of the world where dinosaurs were born is the very geography of the planet itself. Today we look at a map and see 6 great continents separated by oceans. But 230 million years ago, all of that was one thing, a supercontinent called Pangaea, from the Greek meaning literally all the earth. From South America to Europe, from Africa to Antarctica, everything was fused together into a single colossal landmass. The consequences for life were profound. The interior of Pangaea was too far from the oceans to receive any moisture. It was arid in a way that is hard to imagine today. Deserts larger than modern Eurasia, where virtually nothing could survive. Along the coastal fringes there was more life, more humidity, more vegetation. And it is in these habitable strips that the first dinosaurs lived and evolved. But Pangaea was already beginning to crack. The internal forces of the planet, the same tectonic plates that still move the continents today, just imperceptibly to us, were splitting the supercontinent from within. And when Pangaea began to separate, around 200 million years ago, the world changed for good. Seas flooded the fissures, the climate warmed differently, forests spread. And the dinosaurs, who until then had been just one promising group among many, seized that window of opportunity to do something no group of animals had ever done before: dominate virtually every ecological niche on the planet at the same time. The stage was set. The Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, and the Age of Giants was about to begin. The peak of evolution, Jurassic and Cretaceous. 4. The natural arms race. With the fragmentation of Pangaea, the world diversified in an explosive way. New continents, new climates, new forests, new shallow seas teeming with life. And the dinosaurs kept pace with this diversification through an evolutionary explosion that still leaves scientists speechless. Because when we talk about evolution, it's easy to imagine a smooth, gradual, almost gentle process. But nature has no gentleness. What happened during the Jurassic and Cretaceous was more like an arms race than anything the word evolution usually brings to mind. Predators grew larger and more lethal. Prey developed increasingly elaborate defenses. And this mutual pressure, this constant friction between hunting and not being hunted, forged life forms of an almost unbelievable variety. Think about the Stegosaurus. Those enormous plates running along its spine are a mystery paleontologists still debate. For a long time, we assumed they were armor, protection against predators. But more recent analyses suggest something different and far more interesting. The plates were highly vascularized, filled with blood vessels. This means they likely functioned as a temperature regulation system, warming the animal in the morning as it turned toward the sun, and cooling it when the wind blew. But beyond that, they had pigmentation that could change. And it's quite possible the Stegosaurus used them to communicate, attract mates, and intimidate rivals. A suit of armor that was also a billboard. The Ankylosaurus was more direct. If the Stegosaurus was sophisticated, the Ankylosaurus was brutal. Its entire body was covered in osteoderms, bony plates fused to the skin, forming armor so resistant that even the claws of a Tyrannosaurus couldn't penetrate it. But the crown jewel was the tail, a solid bone club, dense as stone, that could be swung with enough force to shatter the leg bones of any predator that came too close. It was not a passive, defensive weapon. It was an active counterattack. The Triceratops carried its horns the way a boxing champion carries their fists, always forward, always ready. 3 horns, 2 of them over a meter in length, plus a bony frill that shielded the neck and shoulders. Fossils show horn marks on the frills of other Triceratops, meaning they fought among themselves too. Likely for territory, for mates, for the same reasons animals still fight today. They were at once a weapon of war and a symbol of status. And then there is the Brachiosaurus. 18 meters tall, 40 meters long, 60 tons of pure biomass in motion. Its neck alone measured over 9 meters, long enough for the animal to reach the 5th floor of a modern building. And the reason was simple and elegant: nothing else could get there. The tallest trees, the most nutritious foliage farthest from the ground, all of it was exclusively its own. No competition for the food at the top. 5. The largest creatures that ever walked the earth. But if the Brachiosaurus is already impressive, it doesn't even come close to what came later in the Cretaceous. Because the Titanosaurs, the group of sauropod dinosaurs that flourished at the end of the dinosaur age, pushed the concept of large to a level that modern biology has never matched since. The Patagotitan majorum, discovered in Argentina in 2014, is the largest land animal we have concrete evidence of. Estimates point to a length of around 37 meters, the equivalent of 4 school buses lined up end to end, and a body mass that may have reached 70 tons. To put that in perspective, the largest African elephant ever recorded weighed 10 tons. The Patagotitan was 7 times heavier. But the gigantism of the titanosaurs raises fascinating questions. How does a heart manage to pump blood up to a head 12 meters off the ground? How do lungs handle breathing in a body that massive? Scientists today believe that, like modern birds, titanosaurs had an air sac respiratory system that allowed a far more efficient oxygen exchange than that of mammals. They were literally high-performance breathing machines wrapped in a colossal body. And here, Brazil enters the map of prehistory. The Austroposeidon magnificus, discovered in Sao Paulo, is the largest dinosaur ever found on Brazilian soil, and one of the largest titanosaurs known to science. With estimates reaching 25 meters in length, it proves that the interior of Brazil, 70 million years ago, was a very different place from the savanna we know today. A green, humid plain crossed by rivers, inhabited by colossi that most people have never heard of. The story of the largest beings that ever walked this earth also passes through Brazil, and it is still being told. 6. The myth that needed to be destroyed: feathers. Now it's time to dismantle one of the most famous and most wrong images in the history of popular science. That picture of the grey-green, scaly, lizard-like dinosaur, it's wrong. For most of the dinosaurs we know, it is deeply, completely wrong. The turning point came in the 1990s during excavations in Liaoning Province, China. The fossils that emerged from there were unlike anything the world had seen before. Dinosaurs preserved in such fine detail that filamentous structures were visible around the body. Feathers. Dinosaurs with feathers. At first, skeptics thought they were fossilization artifacts, skin structures or tissues that had deformed and only looked like feathers by chance. But as more fossils appeared, each more detailed and better preserved than the last, it became impossible to deny. A vast variety of dinosaurs had feathers, proto-feathers, or similar keratin structures covering parts of their bodies. The Eutyrannus huali was perhaps the most impactful, a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex, 9 meters long and over 1.5 tons in weight, and covered in feathers. Not the smooth, symmetrical feathers of a parrot. More primitive filaments, similar to a chick's down, but unmistakably feathers. A feathered Tyrannosaurus. The image changes completely. The Velociraptor, the one everyone knows from Jurassic Park, running in packs, hunting humans through corridors, also had feathers. Fossils show markings on the forearm bones known as quill knobs, the same structures found on the bones of modern birds to anchor wing feathers. The real Velociraptor was smaller than a turkey, had feathers, and probably looked far more like an aggressive, hypertrophied crow than the sleek reptile of cinema. And here is the evolutionary question that makes all of this even more profound. Feathers did not evolve for flight. This is fundamental to understand. For a long time, we assumed feathers were an adaptation for flying, that dinosaurs developed feathers and then learned to fly. But the fossil evidence shows the opposite. Feathers appeared long before flight, probably as thermal insulation, as displays to attract mates or intimidate rivals, as protection. Flight came later as an additional discovery of a structure that already existed for other reasons. Evolution doesn't plan. It works with whatever it already has. Behind the scenes. 7. Intelligence: who was smart and who wasn't. If you could spend an entire day observing dinosaurs from a safe place, one of the first things you'd notice is that they were not all equal in the way they behaved. Some would be curious. They'd explore their surroundings, learn from new situations. Others would be essentially eating machines, robotic, predictable, limited. The difference was in the brain. Paleontology measures animal intelligence through what we call the encephalization quotient, a ratio between brain size and body size. And when we apply this criterion to dinosaurs, staggering differences emerge. The Troodon sits at the top of the list, a theropod dinosaur about 2 meters long with enormous forward-facing eyes that gave it binocular vision and excellent depth perception, characteristics associated with active, intelligent predators. Its brain, in proportion to its body, was larger than that of any other known dinosaur. Some researchers ran the numbers and arrived at a provocative conclusion. If the dinosaurs had not gone extinct, If the Troodon had continued to evolve for another 65 million years, it might have developed something resembling abstract reasoning. Could dinosaurs have become intelligent enough to use tools? We don't know. But the question itself says a lot about the potential that was there. Tyrannosaurus rex falls somewhere in the middle. It had a reasonably large brain for an animal its size, with well-developed olfactory lobes, meaning it had an extraordinary sense of smell, capable of detecting carrion from kilometers away. Recent studies using CT scanning suggest it also had sophisticated auditory perception, especially for low-frequency sounds. But in terms of general intelligence, the most accurate comparisons are with modern crocodiles, efficient, calculated within a limited repertoire, but nothing approaching the cognitive flexibility of a mammal. And then there is the Stegosaurus, which deserves its own paragraph for the sheer scale of the contrast. A 5-ton animal with a brain that early studies estimated at the size of a walnut, about 80 grams. For reference, a domestic cat's brain weighs around 30 grams, but in a body of 4 kilograms. The Stegosaurus had one of the lowest encephalization quotients of any land vertebrate ever recorded. But it didn't matter. It had armor, it had the tail club, and it had a metabolism that worked perfectly well with very little information being processed. In nature, intelligence is just one of the available tools, not the only one that works.
8. Colors, what they actually looked like.
For a long time, we painted dinosaurs gray or green, sometimes brown. Neutral, muted colors that made intuitive sense for large animals that needed to blend in. But science took a completely different turn in recent decades, and what we have discovered is far more colorful in every sense. The key lies in microscopic structures called melanosomes, found in fossilized feathers. Melanosomes are the organelles responsible for feather pigmentation in modern birds, and they have distinct shapes depending on the color they produce. Spherical melanosomes produce blacks and grays, elongated ones produce browns and reds. When researchers began examining fossilized feathers with electron microscopy, they found exactly these structures and were able, for the first time in history, to determine the actual color of animals extinct for tens of millions of years. The Microraptor, a 4-winged dinosaur that lived in China 120 million years ago, had feathers with melanosomes compatible with iridescent sheen, probably a metallic greenish-black, similar to a modern European starling. The Sinosauropteryx had orange and white stripes along its tail, with a dark mask around the eyes like a primitive feathered raccoon. The Anchiornis had a black and white pattern on its wings, with a red crest on its head. These were not discrete animals. They were animals that displayed, that signaled, that used their appearance as a language of communication, and that completely changes the way we imagine their social behavior. 9 sounds, what they actually sounded like. This is another point where cinema created an expectation that science is systematically dismantling. The roar of Tyrannosaurus rex, deep, powerful, reverberating through the forest, is one of the most iconic sound images in popular culture. The problem is that it probably never existed. Crocodiles and birds are the closest living relatives of non-avian dinosaurs, and neither of them roars. Crocodiles produce low-frequency sounds, rumbles and infrasounds that travel through air and water. Birds produce an enormous variety of vocalizations, but nothing resembling the roar of a mammal. And there is an anatomical reason for this. Roars are produced by a specific vocal apparatus that mammals developed and that reptiles and birds simply do not have. What dinosaurs most likely did was closer to what an emu or a cassowary does today. Deep sounds, booming, extremely low-frequency resonances that travel through walls and vegetation. Sounds you feel in your chest before you hear them with your ears. Tyrannosaurus rex probably didn't roar, but when it vocalized, you felt the ground vibrate. The Parasaurolophus takes this to an impressive level of sophistication. The hollow crest projecting backward from this hadrosaur's head functioned as a musical instrument, a resonating tube. Computer simulations showed that air passing through the crest produced a low-frequency sound with an almost musical quality, somewhere between a trombone and a ship's foghorn. Sounds that traveled kilometers through the Cretaceous forest. A voice the entire forest could hear. 10. Family life. Did they care for their young? For decades, the standard view was that dinosaurs behaved like modern reptiles. They laid their eggs, covered them with soil or vegetation to generate heat, and moved on. No parental care, no family bonds, nothing resembling what we call social life. That view was destroyed by a series of discoveries that began in the 1970s and continues to be expanded today. The turning point was the Maiasaura. Discovered by paleontologist Jack Horner in Montana in 1978, the Maiasaura, whose name literally means good mother lizard, was found in communal nesting sites with eggs and hatchlings at different stages of development. The bones of the youngest hatchlings showed joints not yet fully formed, indicating they couldn't move well right after hatching and depended on adults to survive. More than that, the nests were filled with trampled, fragmented vegetation, and some larger hatchlings had worn teeth, meaning they were already eating but still staying in the nest. Someone was bringing food to them. The Maiasaura lived in enormous colonies. Fossil sites show hundreds of nests close together with regular spacing, as though there was intentional spatial organization. And evidence of mass migration suggests that entire groups moved together across the American Cretaceous plain in herds that may have numbered in the tens of thousands. More like bison than solitary monsters. The oviraptor has one of the most fascinating, most unjust stories in paleontology. When the first fossil was found in 1924, it was near a nest of eggs, and researchers concluded the animal had been stealing them. Hence the name oviraptor means egg thief. For decades it carried that reputation, until later discoveries showed that the nest did not belong to another species. It was the oviraptor's own nest. It wasn't stealing eggs. It was brooding its own eggs exactly the way a hen does. The egg thief was in fact a devoted parent, and science took 70 years to recognize that. Velociraptors and other dromaeosaurids appear to have hunted in groups, although the level of coordination, whether it was something close to a collective strategy or simply several individuals chasing the same target at the same time, is still debated. Fossils of protoceratops found with velociraptor claws embedded in them suggest intense individual combat, not coordinated pack attacks. But social behavior existed, and it was far more complex than anyone had imagined for a very long time. The day the world stopped.
11. Chicxulub, the minute by minute of the end.
The sky over Central America is clear, blue, with that late afternoon brightness that gives no warning. The dinosaurs that inhabit the region notice nothing different. Hadrosaurs graze along riverbanks, pterosaurs glide above the treetops. The shallow sea, covering part of what is now Mexico, reflects the afternoon light, and then a light appears in the sky. First, just a bright point, brighter than any star. Then, in a matter of seconds, a fireball that grows and grows and grows until it dominates the entire horizon. An asteroid approximately 12 kilometers in diameter, larger than Mount Everest, tears through the atmosphere at 70,000 kilometers per hour. It crosses the entire layer of air in less than 2 seconds. And then it hits the Earth. The impact releases energy equivalent to 10 billion nuclear bombs detonated simultaneously. A crater 180 kilometers across opens where there had been shallow sea. The rock vaporizes, the seawater vaporizes everything within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, is annihilated instantly. Not burned, not gradually destroyed. It simply ceases to exist. In the first hours, debris ejected by the impact rises above the atmosphere and spreads across the entire planet. When it re-enters, it heats up from friction with the air, and that heat radiates down to the surface. The temperature in the lowest layer of air rises above the ignition point of dry wood. Forests across the planet catch fire not from a flame traveling along the ground, but from the heat of the sky itself. It is as though the entire planet is placed inside an oven for several hours. The animals that survive the initial heat face what comes next. Tsunamis hundreds of meters high sweep the coastlines of every continent. Earthquakes of incalculable magnitude rearrange the planet's topography. Secondary volcanic eruptions triggered by the tremors throw more material into the atmosphere. And then the long winter begins. The smoke, the ash, the sulfur dioxide, launched by the impact and the eruptions, form a curtain in the atmosphere that blocks sunlight. Global temperature plummets. Estimates range between 10 and 20 degrees Celsius of cooling in a matter of months. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stops. Plants die. The herbivores that depend on plants die of starvation, and the carnivores that depend on the herbivores die afterward. It is a cascade, a chain of collapses, a brutal domino of extinctions unfolding over months, years, decades. It was not an instant death for everyone. It was a long dying, a merciless narrowing that eliminated 3/4 of all species on the planet, including all non-avian dinosaurs. All of them except one group. 12. The survivors, why birds are here and the giants are not. The Cretaceous extinction was not democratic. It had a logic. Cruel, blind, without intention, but a logic nonetheless. And understanding that logic is understanding why the world that came after was left to mammals and birds. The fundamental problem of the post-impact world was food, more specifically, the absence of it. With photosynthesis interrupted for months or years, the base of every food chain vanished. Without living plants, the large herbivores died first. They simply couldn't find enough food to sustain bodies that needed tons of vegetation per day. Without the large herbivores, the large carnivores that depended on them followed. Size was the problem, and the dinosaurs had gotten very large. What survived were the small, the generalists, the animals that could eat anything, seeds lying dormant in the soil, insects surviving in organic debris, carrion that was abundant in a world full of carcasses. Exactly the profile of the ancestors of modern birds. The birds that existed in the Cretaceous were small, with fast metabolisms that allowed rapid reproduction, and had beaks and digestive systems adapted to a varied diet. When the world changed catastrophically, they changed with it. And when the sun returned, when the plants began to sprout again, when insects started to proliferate once more, the birds were already there, alive, reproducing, evolving. Here is the most extraordinary thing paleontology has ever discovered, something that still hasn't fully entered popular understanding. Birds did not evolve from dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. Not a poetic metaphor, not a pedagogical simplification. It is formal scientific taxonomy. Birds belong to the clade Avialae, within the theropod dinosaurs within the dinosaurs. When you see a pigeon walking on the sidewalk, you are looking at a dinosaur. When you hear a sparrow singing in the morning, you are hearing a dinosaur. They didn't disappear, they shrank, transformed, and are still here, 66 million years later. Crocodiles deserve a special mention in this story. They survived the Chicxulub impact virtually unchanged. Today's crocodiles are morphologically very similar to those of 200 million years ago. This is not a sign of evolutionary failure. It is the opposite. It means their form works so well for the niche they occupy that natural selection has had almost no reason to change it. When you see a caiman in a river, you are looking at a survival machine that the universe has tested exhaustively and approved. The legacy and the conclusion. 13. Paleontology. Today, rewriting the past in real time. For a long time, paleontology was a slow science. Excavations that lasted decades, analyses that depended on visual comparison with other fossils, reconstructions that were as much art as science. Today, that image is completely outdated. Computed tomography has transformed the field in a way that is hard to overstate. Before, studying the internal structure of a fossil required cutting it, often irreversibly destroying part of the material. Today, a CT scanner allows researchers to build a complete, three-dimensional model of the interior of a skull, a bone, or a fossilized egg without physically touching the object. It is possible to open a fossil virtually, see the inner labyrinth of a dinosaur's ear, map the nasal passages of a tyrannosaurus, reconstruct the brain of a velociraptor, all without damaging the original specimen. Isotope analysis allows us to reconstruct the diet and living environment of extinct animals with a precision that once seemed like science fiction. Every chemical element an animal ingests throughout its life leaves a signature in its bones and teeth. By analyzing these signatures, it is possible to determine whether a dinosaur lived near the sea or inland, whether it migrated seasonally, whether its diet changed throughout the year. The past is recorded in the bones, and now we have the tools to read what is written there. Molecular biology is reaching paleontology from the least expected angles. In extremely rare cases of exceptional preservation, protein fragments have survived for tens of millions of years inside fossilized bones. The analysis of these proteins, not DNA, which degrades far more quickly, but proteins that are more chemically stable, is confirming evolutionary relationships and revealing details about dinosaur physiology that could never have been obtained from anatomy alone. And artificial intelligence is accelerating all of this in a way the scientific community is still absorbing. Algorithms trained on thousands of known fossils can identify patterns invisible to the human eye, suggesting new classifications, identifying new species, correlating findings from different parts of the world. In the last 10 years, more dinosaur species have been described than in all the 150 years before combined. Not because the fossils suddenly appeared, many had been sitting in museums for decades, but because we finally have the tools to understand what we're looking at. And yet, researchers estimate we know less than 10% of the dinosaur species that ever existed. Most of the story is still buried, waiting. Somewhere in the interior of Mongolia, in the Patagonian desert, in the Brazilian Cerrado, there are fossils of creatures no human being has ever seen. Creatures that could change everything we think we know about how dinosaurs lived, how they evolved, how they became what they became.
14. The final reflection, what they teach us.
Dinosaurs dominated this planet for 165 million years. That number is so large it is almost impossible to truly visualize. Think of it this way. The first Homo sapiens appear in the fossil record about 300,000 years ago. Our entire species, from the first anatomically modern humans to today, all of civilization, all the art, all the science, all the technology we have built, fits 550 times inside the period during which dinosaurs ruled the Earth, and they were wiped out. Not through incapacity, not through inferiority, they were wiped out by an external event they had no way to predict, no way to control, and no way to survive at the scale they were living. The universe gave them no warning, there was no negotiation, there was no second chance. We, on the other hand, have consciousness. That is the fundamental difference between us and every other species that has ever existed on this planet. We know that asteroids exist. We know that the climate changes. We know that mass extinctions happen. We know that no species, however dominant, however well adapted, however successful, has a guarantee of permanence. And we know with a precision no Tyrannosaurus could have imagined that we ourselves are changing the planet in ways that are destabilizing the systems that sustain life as we know it. This time it's not an asteroid, it's us. And the great disturbing irony of the situation is that we are the first species in the history of the Earth with the capacity to understand what is happening. And yet we have an enormous difficulty acting at the scale and speed the situation demands. Dinosaurs had no choice. We do. And that choice, that responsibility that comes with 300,000 years of cognitive evolution, with language, with science, with the ability to look at the past and learn from it, is exactly what we are deciding to use or ignore right now, in this moment, in this generation. They reigned for 165 million years, and the universe ended them on an afternoon. We have existed for 300,000 years and have already changed the planet in recognizable ways. The story of the dinosaurs is not just a story about the past, it is a mirror, and what you choose to see in it says everything about what comes next.